Let's go back on PCB, connect to server A with the username of Cisco, password of Cisco. On the default port of 21, quick connect. Not remember passwords, okay. It says connection refused by server. Let's go to server A. If I configure on PCB the proper IP at 172.16.10.100 Cisco. So it says connection refused by server. Let's go on the server and see why connection is being refused. And let's say edit users. Let's remove that user and re-edit. Let's say remove. Let's add again the user of Cisco. Okay. Or the password of Cisco. And shared folders, let's say add. And let's say lab files and Cisco AnyConnect VPN client. Okay. And let's give the right to read and write in that location. And let's say okay. Let's go back on PCB and try to connect again. 172.16.10.100 with the username of Cisco, password of Cisco, the default port of 21, and let's say quick connect. Connection refused by server. Show connection, protocol, TCP. So it seems I don't see the FTP control plane session in the state table. The connection is refused by server. Let's go on server A, close the FileZilla server and reopen it. So it used to work before, it should work also now again. Let's make sure that the server listens on port 21. Let's say netstat. Let's make sure that the FTP server port is open. Netstat -an find 21. And it doesn't seem to be listening on port 21, probably because from the iOS zone-based policy firewall class we have changed the port to be 2121. So let's in here, that was the problem. Let's connect, let's revert back to the default port of 21. Let's say okay. So that was the problem. Let's go now on PCB and reconnect. This time it should work. The control plane session, quick connect. We got connected because we see on this right side the directory of the FTP server, which means if we go in the ASA table and say show connection protocol TCP, we should see the control plane session of the FTP of our FTP session, which there we go. It is the session from PCB or a source port random number, destination of server A on the control plane default FTP port of TCP port 21. And if we say show service policy inspect FTP, ASA has now inspected a lot of packets back and forth. So now the ASA knows we have negotiated to run in active mode, which means the ASA expects the server A to initiate a data plane session to PCB, which is gonna magically allow that session through, even though it flows 50 to 100. And there's no ACL to allow that. Let's confirm. Let's try and download something. So let's try and download, for example, let's try and download on the desktop. So C users ini-admin desktop. So let's try on the desktop, try to download any of those files. Let's try a larger one like this one, which is 30 megs. or this one which is, yeah, this one which is 30 megs, let's say. Transfer was initiated. We should see now in the connection table of the ASA also the secondary session, the data plane session, which was initiated by server A. We know that because if we look at the control plane session in here, which is this one, at the control plane session, that's a control plane session which is on TCP port 21 of the FTP server, because the flags are UIO, which means session is up and traffic flows both inbound and outbound. But for the data plane session, which is this one, first of all, we know it was initiated by the server, not by the server A, not by PCB, because I'm running in active mode, and I know that because the TCP port associated with the server is 20. And also because the flags are U, I, and B. Now, B, capital B, means that this session has been initiated high, it has been initiated in the low to high security level direction. Of course, now that session is gone from the state table because the FTP transfer has been finished. So if you look again in the state table, we no longer see the data plane session. Also, the control plane session has been gone. But if you look in show connection detail, for example, and look at that B flag, capital B, it states in here that initial SYN from outside. What that means is that that session was flowing from a low security level interface to a high security level interface, which is a confirmation, another verification that the data plane session was initiated by server A to PCB, because in this direction traffic is flowing security level 50 to 100, which means low to high, which means in the state table of the in the connection table of the ASA, I see the B flag for the data plane session. And of course, session worked. If we say show service policy, inspect FTP, we see a lot of packets being inspected. Now, if we remove FTP inspection, let's confirm that the data plane session is not going to work as expected. Let's say conft, and we go in that policy map, and we say no inspect FTP. So now the ASA no longer snoops on the control plane session, which means when server A initiates the data plane session, ASA says, well, this session has to be allowed either by the security levels, which is not allowed because it flows 50 to 100, either by ACL, which is not allowed because there is no ACL configured in that direction. So that means the ASA is going to drop the data plane session, but control plane session is still going to work. Let's confirm that. Let's go in PCB. Let's initially delete the download, right click, delete, yes. And let's clear the recycle bin, empty, yes. And now let's quick connect again. Abort previous connection and connecting current tab, okay. I should also see back again in the connection table of the ASA. I should back again see the control plane session. Just show connection. Protocol TCP. I see a lot of DNS entries in there, protocol TCP. And there we go. The session is this one. Between the control plane session is this one in here between PCB and server A. Let's try to download. It's still in active mode. It should not work. Let's confirm that. Let's right click that file and say download, and it's not going to work. As you can see in here now, it says transferring. It's never going to work because the ASA drops the data plane session. If we go in the logs and say show logging, include 172.16.10.100, it says inbound TCP connection denied from server A on port 20 to PCB on negotiated random port number, flag sent, because of the implicit security levels 50 to 100. So let's enable back FTP inspection, show run policy map, conf-t, and inspect FTP. But likewise, inspect FTP means that the ASA is going to inspect FTP traffic on the default port, on TCP port 21. How does the ASA know that? If we say do show run class map, and when we look now do show, the ASA doesn't support the do option. If we look in that default class map, and look on the match default inspection traffic, we say match question mark. There go, the ASA has in here the list of the default ports used by each protocol. Like the ASA knows that FTP by default is traffic on TCP port 21, or that SIP is traffic on UDP port 5060, or that SMTP is traffic on port TCP 25. So this is like the port to application mapping of the ASA. Like what was on the iOS port to application mapping, this is like the port to application mapping of the ASA. Which now what this means is that if I want this FTP transfer to work between PCB and server A, and of course I'm inspecting FTP, but if the server runs on a non-default port, like on port 2121, like we used to do this also with the iOS file section, then I have to tell the ASA to inspect FTP. I have to tell the ASA to treat traffic on TCP port 2121 like FTP traffic. So it means that I have to first, configuration wise, match on my traffic, match on traffic. I can do that optionally via an ACL, but in this case I'm going to do it otherwise via ACL. That's optional, I'm going to do it otherwise. Second, configure class map, and call that ACL. In my case, I'm going to match on the traffic in a class map directly. And third, configure MPF to inspect FTP as per that class map, which means on port 2121. So first, let's confirm that if I run the server on port 21, even though I'm inspecting FTP, control plane session is going to work, but data plane session is not going to work. Because when I say inspect FTP by default, ASA intercepts snoops on TCP traffic on port 21, not on port 2121. So let's configure the FTP server to run on port 2121. Let's say edit settings, and let's change the port back to 2121. Well, let's say 2121, doesn't matter. Let's use the same port as we did on the iOS section. And now let's go on PCB, connect on port 2121. Quick connect, abort and connect a new tab. Well, so it should work. Let's say quick connect. Let's restart the server. Better off to make sure it's listening on port 2121. Let's restart the server to begin with. Let's make sure the configuration was kept, listening on port 2121. Let's make sure the server listens on port 2121. netstat -an find 2121. And it does listen on port 2121. There we go, in here. Let's go on PCB. Let's kill the client, open up the client again. Let's connect to server A, 172.16.10.100, username Cisco, password Cisco, on port 2121. Let's say quick connect. Failed to retrieve directory listening. Let's go and say server, let's say edit users and re-add that shared folder for the username of Cisco. Let's remove and add again the lab files, Cisco, any kind of VPN client. Okay. Let's go on the ASA and let's kill our connections for the moment. Clear connection. And now let's go on PCB and connect again on port 2121. Quick connect, abort, and connect a new session. Okay. If we go on the ASA and say show connection long, we see a TCP session from server A, not from server A, from PCB to server A on port 2121, of course, on the new port, and the session state is up in inbound, outbound traffic. But of course, data plane instruction is not going to work because I'm not inspecting FTP on port 2121, only on port 21. So if we want this to work, it means we have to tell the ASA to inspect traffic on port 2121 as FTP. So I'm going to say class map FTP non-default port. Let's say class map CMAP FTP non-default. And let's say match. So instead of matching on an ACL, we can say match port TCP equal 2121. So I'm telling the ASA that TCP traffic on destination port 2121, I want to inspect that as FTP. So I'm going to go now under my global policy, show run policy map, on policy map global policy, and I'm telling the ASA that traffic matched in this class map named FTP non-default, which means all traffic on TCP port 2121 destination wise inspected as FTP. So treat that traffic as FTP traffic. So show service policy inspect FTP. Now we have the global default inspection, which is going to inspect FTP on port 2121, and also this inspection, which is going to inspect FTP on port. So the default FTP inspection, which inspects FTP traffic on TCP port 21, and this configuration, which inspects FTP traffic on TCP port 2121. And it's something weird that the that class map of ICMP MPF shows up in there, show run policy map. Let's do it again in our configuration, because that says inspect ICMP, not inspect FTP. So it's very weird that this showed up in the show service policy inspect FTP output, the class map ICMP MPF. It's not expected. It's probably a cosmetic bug, conf T, but for the sake of it, let's say that and no class ICMP MPF. Let's look again in the show service policy inspect ICMP, inspect FTP, and there we go. We have now only two options: FTP inspection on TCP port 21 and FTP inspection on TCP port 2121. And now let's confirm that our FTP session is going to work. Let's say quick connect, abort and connect again. Okay, I got connected, the directory listing showed up. There we go. And if we right click, likewise on any of those files, let's pick up the larger one and say download. The data plan session should work, and there we go. Traffic download has started. It's 23% being done. And if we go show connection, there we go. We see the control plane session in here. So between PCB, destination 2 server A on port 2121. And then we see the data plane session initiated from server A, because again we have the B flag, which means traffic was initiated high to low. It was initiated from server A on port 2120 and destined to PCB on the negotiated port number from the control plane session. And if we say show service policy, inspect FTP, there we go. We see no packets matching on the FTP inspection under class map inspection default, because that means inspect traffic on port TCP21 as FTP, which is not our use case. We were running FTP traffic on port 2121. That's why we see that we have matched 51 packets on that class map that we have configured to treat and inspect TCP traffic on port 2121 as FTP.